This will sound very strange, but the movie Star Wars, and specifically the relationship between Han Solo and Princess Leia, is a prophecy that is predicting that an explosion will occur on September 19th, 2022. It will be a major event. The explosion will likely be a dirty bomb. However, it could be something else, such as a nuclear bomb. It will likely occur in Manhattan. It is also likely that the official narrative in the mainstream media that will emerge regarding this event will somehow be a lie. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction was made ahead of time, as does this timestamped email and forensic notes PDF. If you are skeptical, please email me and I will forward these to you. Before the flood judgment in the Bible, God gave Noah a 7 days warning to load the ark before the flood judgment destruction. This predicted explosion, probably a dirty bomb in Manhattan on September 19th, will occur 7 days before the predicted date that Israel will nuke Damascus, Syria, thus fulfilling the prophecy in the Bible in the book of Isaiah in chapter 17. The city of Damascus is known to be the oldest continuously inhabited city in the world. In the Bible, the city of Damascus is symbolism for the world. When the city of Damascus is completely destroyed on the Feast of Trumpets in the Hebrew calendar on September 26th, 2022, it will symbolize the beginning of God's judgment destruction on the world and the beginning of the end times period described in Bible prophecy. This end times period of God's wrath on the world will precede the 1,000 years of peace in the Messianic age that will begin with the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ in October of 2024. Here is the time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF that document that this prediction for the destruction of Damascus is being made ahead of time. People have their worldviews, and so people will tell themselves in their own mind how and why I was able to know these predictions in advance. However, I assure you that your assumptions are not correct. I have spent the last 5 years working from morning until night learning about God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. I assure you that I know better than you the reasons for how and why God has given me a voice through these predictions. In the description box below this video, I will leave a link to a video titled God's Purpose for These Predictions. It would be an enormous shame for you to learn about these predictions, but not know the reasons for how and why God has given these predictions. In other words, unless you watch this video, God's Purpose for These Predictions, you will have missed the point of this video and the point of this video channel. Make sure you watch the video, God's Purpose for These Predictions, either before or after watching this video. I will be slightly more blunt. It would be very foolish to not learn the reason for how and, more importantly, why God has given me a voice through these predictions. In other words, don't be the foolish person that will choose to skip the video titled God's Purpose for These Predictions. Choosing to skip watching this video because you think you know better and more than me, and you think you already know how and why I was able to make these predictions, would be very foolish. 50 days before the signs that occurred on March 14th that revealed the death of James Earl Jones, the actor that played the king in the movie The Lion King, was the day that Larry King died. Larry King, the king of talk, died at the same time as the home run king died, Hank Aaron. Hank Aaron became the home run king when he beat Babe Ruth's home run record, and Babe Ruth is known as the home run king of baseball history. Hank Aaron beat Babe Ruth's home run record of 714 home runs when Hank Aaron hit 715 home runs. In 1961, Roger Maris hit 61 home runs in one season and beat Babe Ruth's home run record of 60 home runs in one season. Thus, Roger Maris became another home run king. Exactly 715 months after Roger Maris hit 61 home runs in 1961 will be May 1st, 2021, and the beginning of the end times period, and the 3.5-year rule of the Antichrist king before the second coming and the return of the King of Kings that will rule over the earth for the 1,000 years age of peace. The must-watch Field of Dreams prophecy video and The Lion King prophecy video, both movies that James Earl Jones starred in, explain the signs that were received on May 1st that confirm that this was indeed the beginning of the symbolic 1,260 days, 3.5 years of the end times period. For example, one of the mentions of this 1,260 days period is mentioned in the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation. This 1,260 days period is said to begin when the dragon, which symbolizes the Antichrist, is thrown down from heaven to earth. After being delayed a few days due to bad weather, SpaceX's Dragon capsule with its Dragon crew returned from the second heaven, outer space, and splashed down on Earth on this date. It is interesting that in context of this sign that reveals the timing of the symbolic beginning of the Antichrist period, that we get the number 44, the Home Run King's jersey number, and the year 1961. And therefore, this reveals not only the timing of the Antichrist's rule, but also the identity of the Antichrist king. It is interesting that the 44th president was born in 1961. The signs that revealed the death of James Earl Jones, the king in the movie The Lion King, occurred 50 days after Larry King, who died at the same time as the home run king Hank Aaron, and Hank Aaron died exactly 50 months after Carrie Fisher released her book, The Princess Diaries. Carrie Fisher played Princess Leia in the movie Star Wars. Princess is royalty and thus ties into this trail of signs. What confirms this is the following connection. The number 36 is Antichrist king symbolism, as it is said in Bible prophecy that the number 666 is associated with the Antichrist, and 36 is 6 times 6, and also 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6. And the 36th triangular number is 666. A triangle number is simply a triangle of numbers, and the last number in the 36th row is the number 666. And 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. 36 days after Carrie Fisher released The Princess Diaries was the day that Carrie Fisher's mother, the famous actress Debbie Reynolds, died. The day before Debbie Reynolds died was the day that Princess Leia, Carrie Fisher, died. Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds died 49 and 50 days after President Trump was elected. In the Bible, it is a count of 49 days and 50 days to the prophetic Feast of Pentecost, and Pentecost means 50th day. In archaic English, the word trump means trumpet, and also the sounding of a trumpet. And God uses trump to trumpet his signs, thus why it is very significant that Carrie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds died 49 and 50 days after the Trump was elected. The Princess Diaries were about Carrie Fisher's love affair with Harrison Ford during the filming of the movie Star Wars. Again, the Princess Diaries were released 50 months before the Home Run King died, at the same time as Larry King died, which was 50 days before the day of the prophetic signs, as explained in other videos that reveal the day that the voice of Darth Vader, which is Antichrist King symbolism, will die. exactly 50 weeks before the Princess Diaries were released, which were about the love affair with Harrison Ford, was the day that Harrison Ford, in an interview promoting his latest Star Wars movie, criticized and made fun of President Trump for having said his famous president movie was Air Force One, a movie in which Harrison Ford starred.
And he liked
Donald, it was a movie. It's not like this in real life. But how would you know?
This critical mocking of Trump was a popular national news story, which made it a national event and a prophetic sign. When asked by his disciples for the signs to look for of his return, Jesus replied with the metaphor of birth pains. According to the medical profession, the average human gestation period is 40 weeks. A 40 weeks period is extremely prophetic in God's signs. Exactly 40 weeks before Harrison Ford and President Trump, God's trumpet, came together in this sign regarding Air Force One was the day that Harrison Ford infamously crashed his vintage World War II plane onto the golf course in California. His plane just happened to be
on the same day as the emergency evacuation at the historic nuclear site that produced the plutonium for the bombs that were dropped on Japan was the day Barack Obama delivered his first speech after leaving office at the globalist leftist convention named Seeds and Chips, which is interesting given that Bible prophecy tells us that the Antichrist system will be rationing food, and it is obvious that chips, as in microchips, in this sign is pointing to the Antichrist system tracking people's activity.
It is said in Bible prophecy 7 times regarding that the period of the Antichrist king's rule will be for 1,260 days. Exactly 1,260 days after the total evacuation of the Hanford nuclear site, the site that created the plutonium for the first atomic bombs that were dropped on Japan, was the day of the national news story regarding the explosion in Harrisonburg, Virginia. As explained in other videos, the number 23 is the Antichrist's number. The basketball president wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. And among other things, 23 weeks connections are very prophetic because it symbolizes the Antichrist. And a very prophetic 23 weeks after this explosion in Harrisonburg was the day that the controversy erupted in the media and on social media regarding the Satan basketball shoes released by a famous rapper that make a reference to when Jesus said he saw Satan falling like lightning from heaven, which is exactly what will be symbolized when Kamala Harris falls from the sky in her plane crash and then is replaced with the Antichrist through the 25th Amendment. These are basketball shoes, and they connect with 23 weeks and point to the basketball president that wore jersey number 23. And also on this same day as the Satan shoes was another prophetic explosion. It was the suicide terrorist church bombing in Indonesia, the country in which the 44th president grew up for 4 years, a country that God uses to point to Barack Obama. And the significance, the prophetic significance of this church bombing is explained in other videos. But also on this same day, which was this Passover, which began at sunset on the 27th and went into the 28th, was the second wettest 2-day period in Nashville history, which just coincidentally began after sunset on the 27th. More is explained regarding this in other videos, specifically the must-watch The Lion King prophecy video. But this was a flood. It flooded Nashville, and it pointed to the biggest flood in Nashville history, which was another extremely prophetic sign, which is explained in the Lion King prophecy video. All right, this date here was also the day of the church bombing in Indonesia, the prophetic church bombing sign, which will be explained in just a second here, and the prophetic signs that occurred on March 13th, 2022, which I will also explain in just a second, occurred exactly 50 weeks after this prophetic church bombing. God uses 50 weeks connections as judgment for the church, which is why it connects with this church bombing, for example, in this example. But God uses 50 weeks connections frequently. The number 50 symbolizes the church, as Pentecost, the Feast of Pentecost, symbolizes the church, and Pentecost literally means 50th day. And also Pentecost is known as the Feast of Weeks, hence why 50 weeks connections symbolize the church, and in context of God's big picture of judgment warning signs, they are judgment warnings for the church. Also, 50 weeks is 350 days, and the 350th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word for examine or judge, to investigate, examine, inquire into, scrutinize, sift, question, to judge of, estimate, determine the excellence or defects of any person or thing, as in the church. This is why this 50 weeks connection between this church bombing and the events, the prophetic signs, which I will now explain, that occurred on March 13th. And then this explanation will also explain how March 13th is, the signs on March 13th are part of the trail of signs that is leading to the date of the predicted explosion in Manhattan on September 19th. This video was originally produced before March 13th, 2022. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections was overwhelmingly pointing to March 13th, 2022 as being extremely important in the trail of signs that are leading to the day that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. Given this knowledge regarding March 13th, 2022, it was therefore assumed that March 13th would be the day of this dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan. Instead, March 13th ended up being a major important step in the trail of signs that is leading to the day of the predicted dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan, which will be on August 21st, 2022. August 21st, 2022 will be exactly 23 weeks after March 13th, 2022. From the Bible, a goat is Antichrist symbolism. In pop culture, the term GOAT is an acronym that stands for greatest of all time. God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the GOAT Antichrist, the 44th president, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. On March 13th, the 44-year-old GOAT of football, Tom Brady, announced with a tweet that he would return in the autumn for a 23rd season of football, which was exactly 23 weeks after the prophetic return of the GOAT football game in October 2021, which is explained in the absolute must-watch Seinfeld New York City bombing prophecy video. On this same day, the 44th president, the GOAT Antichrist, announced with a tweet that he had COVID. This was 23 days before he returned to the White House for the first time since he left. This communicated that the GOAT Antichrist, the 44th president, will return as president to the White House this autumn, just as the GOAT of football will return for another season this autumn. Obama returned to the White House to celebrate the 9th anniversary of his Obamacare nationalized health care. God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together in order to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school and became president in 2009. This is why he celebrated the 9th anniversary of his nationalized health care 23 days after he announced that he had COVID. On the same day that the 44-year-old GOAT of football announced his return in the autumn for a 23rd season, and the 44th president announced that he had COVID 23 days before he returned to the White House, were the expected prophetic explosion signs on March 13th. The GOAT of football wears jersey number 12, And on March 13th, 2022, 12 rockets exploded outside the U.S. consulate in Iraq. This attack on the U.S. consulate was a major news story that involved Israel and Iran. Also, on March 13th, rockets exploded in Ukraine right at the border with Poland, where U.S. operatives were training Ukrainians for war. Prior to these rocket explosions, Russia warned the U.S. that these were legitimate targets. This border with Poland represents the boundary with NATO-allied countries, and NATO is essentially a U.S. organization. In other words, these 12 rockets that exploded outside of the U.S. consulate in Iraq and these rocket explosions on the border with Poland were both prophetic judgment warning signs on America. The explosions in Ukraine were also hinting at the source of the plutonium in the upcoming predicted dirty bomb explosion. The source of this plutonium will be from Ukraine. The date March 13th is 313, and 3 divided by 13 equals 0.230. This is the only date that can hint at the number 23 like this. 23 weeks is almost exactly 44% of a year. God pairs the numbers 23 and 44 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the 44th president, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 in high school. This is why, from the prophetic explosion signs on the date 313, a date that hints at 0.230, and the day that the 44-year-old goat announced his return for a 23rd season, on the same day that the 44th president goat Antichrist announced he had COVID 23 days before he returned to the White House, it is exactly 23 weeks, which is almost exactly 44% of a year to the predicted date of the dirty bomb explosion in Manhattan on August 21st. The upcoming dirty bomb explosion will be a key part in the rise of the Antichrist and his return this autumn to the White House. Furthermore, this is why exactly 50 weeks prior to the explosions on March 13th, were the prophetic church bomb explosions in Indonesia. As explained in other videos, 50 weeks connections symbolize the church. The Feast of Pentecost symbolizes the church. Pentecost literally means 50th day. Pentecost is also known as the Feast of Weeks, hence why God uses 50 weeks connections between judgment warning signs for the church. Furthermore, 50 weeks is 350 days, and the 350th word in Strong's Greek New Testament Concordance is the word meaning to investigate, examine, inquire into, scrutinize, sift, question, to judge of, estimate, determine the excellence or defects of any person or thing, as in the church, which in turn was preceded by exactly 23 weeks to the explosion in Harrisonburg, Virginia. Obama grew up in Indonesia. He will persecute the church and will replace Kamala Harris after she will die in a plane crash explosion on August 25th. Prior to this Harrisonburg, Virginia explosion on October 17, 2020, an explosion was predicted to occur on this date because of prophetic connections to Harrison Ford, who is known for and has had prophetic aviation mishaps. Likewise, an explosion was predicted to occur on March 28, 2021, the day of the church bombing explosions in Indonesia, because of this 23 weeks connection. The Harrisonburg, Virginia explosion sign was preceded by exactly 23 months with the prophetic 44 sailors Argentine submarine explosion sign, which hinted at the 44th president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school in Hawaii. And this 44 sailors sign was in turn exactly 44 weeks after the infamous false missile alert in Hawaii. Again, God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together In order to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school and became president in 2009. Also, March 13th, 2022 was exactly 23 months after the prophetic rainbow over Manhattan that stretched perfectly between the two iconic towers of Manhattan, the Empire State Building and the One World Tower, which hinted at the Twin Towers that collapsed on 9/11. During the peak of COVID in Manhattan during the lockdown, and just a few days prior to this, it was reported that the death toll from coronavirus had surpassed that of 9/11. In turn, the prophetic rainbow over Manhattan was exactly 9 months, which symbolized the birth pains of the beginning of the end times period that Jesus spoke about after the extremely prophetic Manhattan blackout on the day of Hurricane Barry, which was known for the blackout power outages that it engendered. In his autobiography, Dreams from My Father, Obama said that changing his name from Barry to Barack symbolizes who he is today. Hurricane Barry and the Manhattan blackout was in turn exactly 923 months after the Manhattan Project officially began. The Manhattan Project was the code name for the covert government operation to develop the first atomic bomb, which is why the Manhattan Project connects through an extremely prophetic trail of signs to the day that a dirty bomb will explode in Manhattan. All right, the analysis for adding 23 weeks to the day of the return of the GOAT, Tom Brady prophetic sign, and the return of Barack Obama prophetic sign on March 13th, on the same day as the prophetic explosions on the border of Poland and in Iraq at the U.S. consulate. All of this analysis was pointing to August 21st, exactly 23 weeks later, as was just explained. And once again, all of that analysis was 100% correct. August 21st ended up being another step in the trail of signs that is leading to the day of the prophetic explosion, probably a dirty bomb, probably in Manhattan. On this day, on August 21st, as was predicted, we received an explosion sign. The main news story of the day was an explosion. And this explosion was involving Ukraine. And again, this was connected with 23 weeks. August 21st was connected with 23 weeks to the prophetic explosion, the Russian rockets that exploded at the border of Poland, the base where U.S. operatives were training Ukraine military, the Polish border being the border with NATO, which is essentially a U.S. organization. In other words, it was a U.S. bombing sign, and it involved Ukraine. Well, this bombing in Russia on this August 21st date was the day that Alexander Dugin's daughter was killed in a car bombing near Moscow. And it's quite obvious from the story that the Ukraine, or members of some faction within Ukraine, were responsible for this bombing. In the story, the story goes that there was a sympathetic Russian lawmaker that had, I guess, defected to some degree to Ukraine, making a statement on this day from Kiev that a particular previously never heard of Russian group was responsible for this bombing, which of course obviously is a cover-up, because obviously Vladimir Zelensky doesn't have any or complete or if any control over his nationalists and Nazis fighting Russians in eastern Ukraine, and no doubt this was an act from Ukraine to intimidate Moscow, obviously. And so anyway, the daughter of Alexander Dugin is famous herself, but also Alexander Dugin, the intended target. It was intended for him, but at the last minute, the daughter chose to drive that car and Alexander Dugin didn't. And anyway, he is known as the spiritual, intellectual brain of Russia, and some say the intellectual behind Putin's ideology. Anyway, in other words, he was an important figure, symbolic figure for Russia. But the bigger point here is that this is an explosion, and it happened on the date we expected an explosion, and we are expecting a dirty bomb in Manhattan. And as I have been saying, maybe not in this video, I forget, but I predict that the source of the dirty bomb material will be from Ukraine, and it will be Ukraine will be involved in this dirty bomb. It will be a false flag. It will probably be blamed on Russia when in fact it is Ukraine, and the material will come from Ukraine anyway. And anyway, what all confirms that September 19th is the end of this trail of signs that is leading to the day of this prophetic explosion of a dirty bomb in Manhattan is that September 19th will be 29 days after the daughter of Alexander Dugin died in this explosion, and she was 29 years old, which is confirmation of this 29 days addition to this explosion on August 21st. The reason I believe why God needed to involve this particular sign in the trail of signs, I think the last step in the trail of signs, is to confirm the source of this dirty bomb. And like I have been saying in this and probably more in other videos, I believe it will be a false flag. There will be some sort of lie involved in the narrative, the mainstream narrative regarding this explosion in Manhattan. And God needed to have this particular sign on August 21st in order to confirm that it is Ukraine that is behind this explosion. Now, other videos have explained and will explain how, for example, Zelensky is Antichrist symbolism, the 44-year-old that is leading the nation that was 44 million before the invasion. God uses all-time records in his signs to confirm his signs, and on this same day as this explosion in Moscow, on August 21st, we received a second prophetic sign that confirmed the analysis here. On this day, the premiere episode aired of the new show House of Dragon, and it received a record 9.99 million views. The number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel. As from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. The name House of Dragon is hinting at the White House and the dragon that will be in the White House, the return of the Antichrist, Barack Obama, the 44th president. In Bible prophecy, in Revelation chapter 13, the Antichrist is said to speak like a dragon, and in Revelation chapter 12, a dragon is used as a metaphor for the Antichrist. This House of Dragon sign and 9.99 million views on the same day as the car bombing in Moscow prophetic sign is confirmation of God's judgment, that the upcoming dirty bomb explosion is part of God's judgment that will give rise to the Antichrist. In other words, this dirty bombing explosion event in Manhattan and Israel nuking Damascus will be part of the process that leads to the rise of the Antichrist coming to power. And what is astounding is that God pairs the numbers 9 and 23 together to confirm the signs and connections and to reveal the identity of the Antichrist, the basketball president that wore jersey number 23 and became president in 2009. Also from the Bible, the numbers 9 and 23 symbolize God's judgment. This 9.99 million views for this show House of Dragon occurred exactly 23 weeks after Tom Brady announced his return for a 23rd season 23 days before the dragon Antichrist returned to the White House. The number 9 symbolizes judgment in the Bible, especially when it is paired together with the number 17, as it is in this case here, and also especially when it is paired with the number 23, as it is in this case here. Pairings of the number 9 and 17 also reveal the identity of the Antichrist, Barack Obama, who was president from 2009 until 2017, and arrived in Washington, D.C. as the senator from Illinois in the 109th Congress, and will return to Washington in power as the president during the 117th Congress, which began on January 3rd, 2021. Exactly 9 years before the Hanford nuclear site emergency evacuation was the day that Barack Obama, while on the campaign trail, made his infamous 57 instead of 50 states gaffe, which is interesting given that Barack Obama is from the 50th state. And it is also interesting because there are 57 states in the Islamic Organization of Cooperation, one of which Obama grew up in, Indonesia. This was exactly 50 years after a TV episode aired in 1958 titled The End of the World, in which the plot regarded a man named Trump that sold the townsfolk of an old western town a wall of security from the coming cosmic radiation doomsday. President Trump's presidency has been synonymous with selling his border wall of security. The number 144,000 is a prophetic and prominent number in the book of Revelation. 144,000 hours after Barack Obama's infamous 50 states gaffe, that was exactly 50 years after the TV episode titled The End of the World, will be the Day of Atonement in 2024 and the second coming of Lord Jesus Christ, who will vanquish the Antichrist. At the end of the end times period, aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. Jesus died for you. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video. And once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more. Don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com.